Happy New Year and hello board game brothers and sisters. Welcome to the first episode of the year where we'll be going over all the campaigns coming up for the next week. And we are definitely back. I'm back. The Kickstarter games are back, and there's just a ton of games to talk about. And yes, I do know my shelf is a bit of a mess right now, but I do always say to keep that shelf cluttered, so that's my excuse. I just want to thank everyone for all the awesome comments on my previous video where I was going over all the campaigns that I backed over the past year. If you want to check that one out, I'll leave a link to that right up here. But I really appreciate all the fantastic and really kind comments, and I'm going to reply to all of them, so if I haven't responded yet, I will get to it. I do have a little bit of time this weekend. I'm going to get all caught up. And if you're new to the channel, thanks for being here. And the way that I usually start this is that I go over anything new that I just discovered in the past week, and I do have a few really cool items to go over. And the first one is that we have a date for Marvel Zombicide. It's going to be launching on January 18th. This one's going to be a lot different, where you're actually playing as the zombies. I believe they're going to have a couple modes where you can play as the zombies, but you can also be playing against the zombies as usual. And of course, this comes with the Marvel theme, covering that iconic moment in the Marvel universe where all the Avengers and the entire world basically turned into zombies. And this is also offering a giant Galactus miniature, if you want to call it a miniature, that will be transferable into zombie and regular form. Not too much more to jump into that right now, but stay tuned because I'll go into more detail in an upcoming episode. And next we do have a new date for the next iteration of Batman Gotham City's Chronicles, which is going to be the Season 3 campaign. And this is going to be adding a bunch of new content to that game, and also it's going to be coming with a whole new rewrite of the rulebook, which was a huge sticking point for me and a lot of other people. This is a campaign that I'm super excited about. I'm not so sure that I'll end up backing it, but it seems like they do have a really solid system for this game that started with their Conan game and then they iterated on and released for Batman. The big issue with this was the rulebook and the iconography, so I know that they've improved the rulebook. I hope that they've also improved on the iconography because I know a lot of people that do love this game, but the overhead to learning it, teaching it, and getting to the table often stops people from actually playing this one. But at the very least, you can get excited for some pretty awesome miniatures covering almost every version of every character in the Batman universe, because the previous campaigns almost covered everything already, and I'm sure there's going to be a ton more that they're adding to the mix. And the next one that I'm really excited about is a new version of Lords of Vegas. I don't think there's going to be any changes to the rules, but it's getting a complete makeover, and this is a game that's been around for over 10 years, and it's one that I have in my collection and I don't plan on getting rid of it anytime soon. But I did roll my eyes a little bit at this one when I heard about it because they just did a campaign not too long ago that only fulfilled back in June of 2021, and that was offering the older version of the game and an expansion, so I feel kind of bad for anyone who did back that campaign because it definitely wasn't an inexpensive campaign if you're getting the actual Lords of Vegas base set, and now we're discovering that they're going to be releasing a brand new version of it not even a year later. Kind of leaves a bit of a bad taste in your mouth, and I do feel for you, but I'm also excited to see what they do differently with this new iteration. And that's all I had for new discoveries, so let's check out the Kickstarters. And the first one we have is launching on the 11th, and this is going to be 2 expansions for the Viscounts of the West Kingdom, and this is one of the 3 in the trilogy of the West Kingdom games from Garfield Games, and they're all rated quite high. This one is in the top 200, and I believe there is already a couple expansions out for this already, but this is going to be adding another 2. And if you're not familiar with Viscounts of the West Kingdom, each player is going to be starting the game with their own player board, and you're going to be using your player board to put different character cards into play, and they're going to be moving across your board left to right, allowing you to perform different actions and gain different resources, and they might even cause some additional effects once they come off your board. The player board also allows you to build buildings for special bonuses, and it also tracks your virtue and corruption, which is this track here that's outlined in purple. And the way that that works is as you gain more virtue, you're going to be moving up the virtue track, but then as you gain more corruption, you're going to have another token that moves down the same track, and then whenever they line up, you're going to have to deal with those consequences at the end of the round. And one thing I should mention about this is that this is a deck building Euro game, so all players are actually be starting with the same deck of cards, but then you're going to be acquiring new cards throughout the game, and then reusing those cards, maybe burning some cards to modify your deck as the game moves forward. On your turn, you're going to be playing those cards onto your player board, like I mentioned before, and then that's going to allow you to move some of your Viscounts around the main shared board. And wherever you move your Viscount on the board is going to allow you to perform special actions. So you might be able to do things like gain resources, build buildings, collect sets of tokens for victory points at the end of the game, send workers out to the center area of the board, and if you ever have 3 of your same workers in a single segment there, they're actually going to separate, one moving left, one moving right, and one moving upward. And it's going to also cause cascading effects if the ones that moved cause another 3 of your workers to be in the same spot. And that's going to grant you some different bonuses, but essentially you get more victory points if you have more of your workers towards the center of that circle. You might have noticed this board is also made up of different sections, and each section is double-sided, so you can actually flip different areas on the map to change up the entire board and add a little bit of variability between plays. The Keeper of the Keys expansion is going to be adding a few new modules, but the first thing I want to point out is that it's going to be upgrading your player boards into some thicker cardboard, and it's also going to have some punch-outs so that your corruption and your virtue tokens can slot right in. You might also notice that it includes some cutouts at the bottom of the player board, and this is going to be where your new module takes play. This new module introduced treasure chests that players can earn throughout the game, and whenever you gain one of these chests, you can choose to slot it in one of the 3 areas beneath your cards on your main player board. And then when one of your cards moves above it, if it matches an icon with that chest, it's going to allow you to use that treasure chest special ability. And this is going to allow the players to be a little bit more powerful and to ramp up the game a little bit faster. And that's something that I am a huge fan of. And then another small addition that this expansion adds is 3 public buildings that players will be competing for against each other. So these are 3 buildings that only one player can get, and you're going to be racing to get them first. There's also going to be a ton new townsfolk, heroes, and manuscript tiles, and some of these are going to be offering different ways to interact with some of these new mechanisms added through this expansion. And then the next expansion is the Gates of Gold expansion. This is also going to be adding a few new things, but the main module is that it's going to be adding the King's Order to the deck of cards that you can acquire and put into your queue of cards. And the way that these work is that they are a little bit different because they are one-time use, so they only go through your queue once, and unlike everything else in the whole deck building aspect of this game, this one does not get shuffled back into your deck. Instead, it goes back to the pile where it came from. And this expansion is also going to be adding a whole deck of cards of outsiders that are characters that are not from the main kingdom. So they are from outside your realm. You might want to trust them, you might not want to trust them. But when you activate one of these King's Orders cards, it's going to allow you to gain one of those outsider cards into your deck, and then you're going to be able to either keep that for the rest of the game to use its ability, or if you are able to exile that card, essentially getting rid of it from the kingdom, then it is going to allow you to perform some special actions in doing so. And those are all outlined on the right side of the card, which can be pretty powerful and useful depending on when you activate them in the game. And this expansion is also going to be adding some new building bonus cards, as well as new townsfolk and heroes and manuscript tiles as well. I really do like these 2 expansions. They seem to add quite a lot of fun decisions to the game without bogging it down with too many extra rules or too many extra components. And it just does a really good job integrating some fresh ideas that just play off the existing systems that already exist in the game. So if you're interested in this one, you can click to get notified, and I have links to all these campaigns in the description below. Also launching on January 11th, we have City Break, and this one is specifically designed for 2 players, and this one's really interesting because it's a unique blend of card drafting and math-related puzzle solving. And the way that this game works is that players are each going to have a board with 6 different columns on it, and players are going to be trying to get those columns into harmony or equilibrium. And the way that you do that is by zooming into one of these sections, and you'll notice that there's 3 sub-columns of numbers within each of these columns, and you're really looking at the sum of each of those columns. And there's 2 things that you're trying to achieve. You can either try to get the sum of 2 columns to equal each other, and then you don't need to worry about the 3rd column, or you can try to get the sum of the 2 columns together to equal that 3rd column. So you can see in this image here, they show that there's 2 columns that are equal to each other, so that fulfills one of the requirements. Or you can try and go for the other requirement where you're adding up 2 of the columns, and if you sum 2 of them together and they equal the 3rd, then that is also credible. And the thing that dictates which of these 2 you're going for in each section of your board are these other cards that show 6 circles, and each one of these circles represents one of the columns on your board. And then within 2 of those circles, there's either going to be a plus or an equal sign, and that's going to let you know whether you need to get the 2 columns to equal each other or whether you need 2 columns to add up to the 3rd. You might have noticed some of the cards also have different icons on them in place of a number, and if you're able to get 3 matching icons, then you will earn a title that matches that image. At the end of your turn, if all 6 of the areas of your board are completed, then your opponent's going to get 1 more turn, and then the game's going to end, and you're going to tally up your total victory points to see who won. Players are going to earn points for their completed columns, but you're going to gain more points if you used more cards within that column. But you'll also gain victory points for different titles that you earned, matching different images, or achieving different target values. And of course, the player with the most victory points wins the game. Also on the 11th, we have Hike, and this is a lightweight drafting game for 2 to 6 players, where players are going to be trying to recruit different huskies into their sled and be the first to cross the finish line. The players are going to start the game by putting out different landscape tiles out on the board face down, and these cards represent the different conditions that players are going to be racing through. Players are also going to be starting with some starter huskies as well as some special ability cards. And the game plays over 2 phases. There's the prep phase and then the race phase. During the prep phase, some of the landscape tiles are going to be flipped up, and this is going to give players an idea of what kind of weather conditions that they're going to be encountering for the next phase of the race. And then players are going to take turns drafting different huskies onto their team. And certain huskies are only going to work well together, and then some huskies also perform better on different terrain types than other huskies. And the way that you know which huskies work well together is all dependent on their position on your sled and also the different colored outline on their card. And this image here has a really great example of that with this grid of huskies, how you can see that all the different colored edges all match each other so that they all work well together, and this is going to be a great husky team to pull your sled. And also a small detail here, and I'm not sure if it was intentional by the designers, but I really like these dual colored cards because it really fits with the huskies thematically, because I'm not sure if you'll know this, but it's pretty common for huskies to have 2 different colored eyes. But essentially this whole prep phase is a bit of a balancing act of trying to get huskies that work well together, but then also prepare you for the different weather conditions that you're planning to encounter based on those landscape cards. And then we have the race phase where players are going to be activating each of their huskies to move forward across the different types of landscapes. And then they're also going to be using their items and ability cards to try and encourage their huskies so they can get further along in the race. And then the rounds repeat like this, where players do another preparation phase and a race phase until the race is completed. And the first player to cross the finish line wins the game. Also on the 11th, we have Puzzle Strike 2, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play. And it says here that this re-implements Puzzle Strike 3rd edition, but I do think that's a little bit incorrect because this new version is actually going to be playing quite a bit differently from that original game. And the way that this works is that players are going to be doing a bit of deck building as well as pattern building. And players are going to be continually gaining gems throughout the game, but you don't want to get too many because you will get overwhelmed and it actually hurts you in the game. But players want to get enough gems that they can match up gems of like colors so that they can crash them together, and that's essentially how you get power to attack the other players. You're going to be aligning your gems and then performing different actions with your cards to try and rearrange those gems to get like colors together to fill up your power meter of that type of gem. There's 4 different power meters, and filling up each one of them allows you to perform a special move to attack the other players. And as this process unfolds, gems will fly back and forth between the players as they desperately try to remain under that threshold. Players will also be able to gain the Scepter of Power by stealing it from the other players as it gets passed around throughout the game. And this is a really nice item to have because it automatically fills up all your power meters at the end of each of your turns, so that you're always starting your next turn with a full power meter in each of the 4 categories. Another really nice advantage to having this is that all your attacks will now attack every other player instead of just one of them. But then the caveat of this is that every other player's attack will also attack you. So if you've ever played King of New York or King of Tokyo, it acts very similar to that when you have your monster in the actual center of the board. The game's also going to come with these really nice looking components that represent each of the 4 different gems, and there's also going to be a bunch of characters based on the video game with the same name. And once again, if you're interested in any of these campaigns, I have links in the description below. Also launching on January 11th, we have Skytear Horde, and this plays 1 to 3 players. It takes just 30 minutes to play. And this is a really interesting one for a few reasons. This one's inspired by tower defense video games, but then it plays similarly to one of those head-to-head card battlers like Keyforge. The thing that really sets this apart from all those games is that this one was designed first and foremost as a solo or cooperative game. But if you are also interested in competitive, this does offer it as well in a 1 versus many mode. But the way that this game works is you're going to mix mix and match a few choices at the start of the game. You're going to be choosing a castle to defend, but then you're also going to be choosing your legendary heroes that you're going to be using to rally your troops with, and then you're going to be choosing the alliance decks that you want to include in the game. And there are a few different pre-made decks that you can choose from, but as you get more familiar with the game, you can also mix some of these decks together and create different varieties that don't come exactly pre-made out of the box. And to play the game, you're going to be going up against hordes of monsters that are swarming from a spawn gate. And you're going to be defending in 6 different lanes, and this picture outlines a little bit of what that looks like. Different monsters are going to be approaching through different lanes, and you're going to be issuing your cards out into the play area, and then any cards that are in line with another monster in that lane are going to go head to head and attack each other. But if there is not a monster in that lane, then you're going to instead attack the spawn gate that the monsters are coming from, and your goal is to try and destroy that gate. But if there's any monsters that are in a lane that you are not defending, then they're going to be able to strike your castle. And of course you lose if your castle is destroyed or if you run out of cards. And the interesting thing about this game is that you do not draw cards every time it is your turn. Instead, you earn cards by performing different feats in the game and destroying different monsters. So you really want to keep that in mind, and you really have to manage the cards that you have and try not to lose them carelessly. And that definitely can happen because there are smaller monsters that can come out of that spawn gate, but rather than going into the typical lanes to attack you, they're going to go around the lanes and just start pilfering your castle. These monsters don't stick around too long and they'll leave on their own, but if you allow them to do that, they're going to be stealing a few cards of yours, which are a precious commodity in this game. So you might want to attack them as well to try and stop them in their tracks. If you survive long enough and you're able to take out those spawn gates, then eventually you're going to be going up against the Outsider, which is sort of a final boss in this game. And this is going to be an epic showdown where if you come out successful, you will win the game. And this is one of those games that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't keeping an eye on this game, but as I did more and more research to do this video, I just got more and more interested in this game. And everything I'm seeing from it looks really solid. And a cooperative card battler is not a game that I currently have in my collection, so there's definitely a spot for this one. And I'm really interested to learn more on the mechanisms of how you earn cards in this game because that's something that I really haven't seen before and sounds really cool. This campaign will also be including their original Skytear game, so if you're interested in that as well, this is also a great time to jump in on that. And if you are interested in this at all, I highly recommend clicking that Notify Me button because this has a really nice early bird with an entire promo deck that you'll get absolutely for free. And just a small teaser here, but the price on this one is pretty reasonable as well. And yes, you can go crazy on the deluxeification if that's what you're interested in. Also on the 11th, we have Sink or Swim, and this plays 3 to 6 players and is a collaborative synchronized swimming game. And this game plays over 5 rounds, where each round players are trying to complete one step of their synchronized swimming routine. And players are going to be working together to try and fulfill different requirements for each one of those steps, because each round you're going to be flipping a card that's going to give you that requirement, and then players all have to fulfill that on their own personal player boards. Each player board is going to have a number 1 through 5, and depending on the round that you're on, players have to put the cards that they think will fulfill that requirement by putting those cards face down on their board. Players are working together, so you'll be able to trade cards with other players to try and fulfill those requirements. And if no one else has the cards that you need, then you can also go ahead and draw from the central deck. Some of the different requirements could be having 3 odd cards or 2 cards of the same color, or maybe have a card that's higher than a 9 or lower than a 2, or different things like that. The game also offers an app that essentially acts as your timer, but then it also moves you through the different rounds, and it even grades you depending on the performance of the different players. At some point in the game, there will also be a random twist that will throw a random curve that players will have to deal with. And then after all those rounds, when the entire routine is completed, all the players will be flipping the cards around their player board and revealing how synchronized they were and getting graded on how well they performed throughout the game. And the app will give you a final score, but it'll also keep track of your previous games so that you can try and compete against yourself and beat your high scores. Also on January 11th, we have CoLab, and this is actually a relaunch of a game that launched a few months ago, but they pulled it down and took some time to develop it a little bit more, focus a little bit on the shipping and improving some of the costs, as well as the manufacturing. And they've done a lot of work on it since, and they've continued to play test it and done all that good stuff, but I don't think I can do a better job covering it than I did back then. So what I'll do is I'll just play you exactly what I said before, because all of it still applies, and I'll just let you know of anything additional that I want to add. So we can go ahead and check out this really cool channel down here, and make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. and let's just see what this guy has to say. And regardless of the name, this is not a cooperative game, at least not intentionally. And in this game, players are mad scientists equipped with a team of minions, and players are going to be sending out their minions along with their scientists out on the board to gather resources, because players are going to want to complete different creations in the form of cards, which will upgrade your character with new abilities and trigger new effects. And this one's going to be my pick of the week, but before I get to that, I'll just explain a little bit more about how the game plays. Like I said, players are going to be sending their minions out on the board, but first you're going to be loading them with a die in order to determine the resources that you want to gather as that minion travels around the board. Aside from your minions, you're also going to gain resources by rolling dice, and you'll be able to gain new dice throughout the game and build your own dice pool. And you're going to be using those resources to build different cards by using your scientist. And in order to do that, you're going to have to send your scientist out on the board. And what's really neat here, and why I think this game is called CoLab, is because when you go to build those cards, you can actually use the resources from minions adjacent to you on the board. So there is kind of a cooperative aspect here where the minions don't mind who they help, but each individual player is going to be trying to take advantage of that while trying to move their minions and their character to try and prevent it for the other players. Each card you build will get added to your tableau, which will gain you new abilities, trigger special effects, or gain new victory points. A neat aspect of this is the cards all behave a little bit differently, and you can create some really neat chaining depending on the cards that you put adjacent to each other. The game ends once a player has 12 cards in their tableau, and the player with the most victory points wins the game. And the reason I made this one my pick of the week is because as I was reading it, it was really reminding me of one of my favorite games, which is Dinosaur Island. And the game itself looks like it plays very differently, but what I really love about Dinosaur Island is how it combines a lot of different mechanisms into a really fun package that's easy to learn and play. And I think this is really nailing on that as well, but giving you a very different game with some very different mechanisms. I know that feeling I got is very subjective, and I probably wouldn't have made it my pick of the week just on that, but because I got that feeling, I kept looking into this game, and then I discovered that one of the designers is actually the co-designer of Dinosaur Island. And discovering that after I made the correlation kind of validated it for me, because now I have 2 points of reference, and I feel like it's less subjective because of it. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, Jonathan Gilmour is an excellent designer, and he's created a ton of really great games. So this one is just worth a look just for that reason alone. But he isn't the only one that designed this game. He also co-designed it with John Meatling, and although he doesn't have quite as many games under his belt, he is the designer of one of my favorite solo games, which is Palm Island, which I still have in my collection today, so there's definitely some points there as well. Unfortunately, there's nothing under the ratings tab proving that they've been playtesting and getting feedback on this game, but on their campaign page they do say that they have been playtesting this for a very long time. But based on the designers and the history, I really don't have any doubts about that. But publishers and designers, when you do playtest your games, make sure to ask your playtesters to leave a comment and rating on Board Game Geek. I'm sure you're getting a lot of great feedback from your playtesters and you're iterating on your game because of it, but seeing some ratings and comments here really helps validate that for the rest of us. They have continued to do playtesting, and there is comments on their Board Game Geek page now, so that's awesome to see. And they also do have some evidence of playtesting in different areas, such as different sections in the forum, as well as other areas on their website and things like that. I'm not 100% sure, but I also heard that Palm Island will be available in this campaign. So if you're interested in either of these games, definitely make sure to get notified on launch, because this is definitely one that you'll want to check out. And the next game launching on the 11th was a very close contender for the Discord pick of the week, which it was just trailing behind by 1 vote. And this one is Final Girl Season 2. And as the name implies, this is for the second campaign, and the nice thing about this is all the Season 1 campaign backers have just received their games, so there's a lot of reviews going up and a lot of information, and you might even be able to find a copy for yourself if you want to try it and see if you want to jump in on Season 2. But I will warn you, this can easily become a very expensive game, especially for a solo experience. And the way that this game works is that there's a core box that contains all the core components and the core rule set of the game, and then you have all these different feature presentations that come in these different boxes, and they kind of are little spin-offs off of different horror tropes in the horror movie genre. And what those allow you to do is that you can actually choose a location and a killer from one of those boxes, and then you can mix that with any of the final girls from any of the other boxes. And the final girl is the character that you're going to be playing as, and you're the last hope against the killer. And as you can probably guess, if you've ever seen any horror movie in the history of mankind, I'm sure all of her friends were brutally murdered in idiotic and predictable ways. But that's in the past now, and it's up to you to prevent any future victims from falling to the killer and to try and take out that killer yourself. And once the game's set up, it'll look a little something like this, where you have your killer as well as your location, and then you have a few different metrics that you're tracking, such as your health, the time, and the horror track. The game plays over 5 different phases, and the first phase is the action phase. We're going to be playing different cards and rolling dice to determine the success level of those cards that you're playing. And the number of dice that you get to roll is completely dependent on where the horror track lies. If there is more horror, then you won't be able to roll as much dice, so you'll want to get that horror track down as much as possible, so you're maximizing the amount of dice that you get to roll. You can see in this image as well that there's a bunch of little meeples out on the map. These are all potential victims of the killer, and you can actually go around and try to rescue these before the killer can get to them. And whenever you rescue one of those victims, you'll be able to put it onto your player card, and this will give you different upgrades depending on the icon that it covers. But of course, you are the final girl and you have a job to do, and you don't want to waste all your time rescuing people. So the other action you can do is to try and attack the killer. And then after the action phase, we have the planning phase. And you can also think of this as sort of a market phase, because you'll be able to purchase cards. And the way that you do that is you'll be able to spend any remaining time that you had from the previous round in order to buy those cards. And you can spend all the time you have remaining, because after this phase, your time will reset. And then after that phase, you have the killer phase. And this is the phase where you reveal a card and it lets you know what the killer is going to do. But then you're also going to reveal a terror card that can allow the killer to perform some additional actions and affect your terror track and have other negative consequences. And of course, the killer's intention is to try and kill as many people as possible, especially the final girl. And for this reason, it's no surprise the next phase is known as the panic phase. And if the killer was able to take out any victims, and there's other victims that were also in that location, they're going to panic and they're going to perform different movements depending on where they are. And then the last phase is the upkeep phase, where you normally don't have to do very much. You just do a little bit of cleanup and prepare for the next round. And the game continues like this until you've taken out that killer or completed your endgame objectives, or if the killer's taken you out. Surprisingly, I couldn't find too much info on Final Girl Season 2, but I don't think it's changing up the core game too much. I think it's just adding more of those feature presentations to the game and adding a little bit more variety, and also an opportunity to jump in on the game if you missed out on the previous campaign. And if you are interested in solo games, you'll definitely want to look into this one some more and click that Notify Me on Launch button. And if we zoom and enhance on this image here, it can give us a little bit of an idea of what we can expect. And this first box looks like it's going to be riffing on the Alien series, where we have an alien monster and a character that looks like the main character from the Alien movies. And then this next one has you fighting the organism in Station 2891, and I can't really see the image too well, but it kind of looks Lovecraftian. And then we have the intruders at the Wingard Cottage, and the image on the box kind of looks like a Wendigo, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then there's the big bad wolf in the storybook Woods, which has you fighting up against a werewolf. And then the last one puts you in one of my least favorite settings, which is a mental asylum. Please just throw me in the middle of the woods or the center of a crop circle. Just don't put me in a mental asylum. I'm not ready. Also on the 11th, we have a campaign for some wargaming terrain, and this is for the Rampart budget-friendly wargaming terrain. And this is going to include all sorts of components to upgrade your environment for your games. And the interesting thing about this is they did talk to the community and see what the community was looking for and what they felt like they were missing from their current terrain options. And they tried to go ahead and offer those items. And this is going to include some different buildings, bridges, as well as standalone objects. And they're also going to be adding a whole ruins theme, as well as a clear plastic theme that's going to be a little bit more on the futuristic side. And if you want to see more on this, I got links in the description below. And launching on January 11th, we have Yucatan, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play. And this is the one that I'm most excited about for this week, and for that reason, it's going to be my pick of the week. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this one is because it's designed by Guillaume Montage, who is also the designer of Kemet. And I think this will get compared to Kemet and other games in that genre, but I think what really stands this one apart is that it has a shorter playtime and it's a lot simpler and easy to get out on the table. There's not a whole lot of rules or components for this game, but I think the package it offers is really tight, and one of the really exciting aspects of it is that it involves human sacrifice. Unlike Kemet, this one does not take place in an Egyptian theme, but instead it has a Mayan theme, and players are going to be trying to appease the gods, and in order to do that, you're going to have to make many, many sacrifices. The pictures on the BGG page aren't the greatest, so I'm just going to go over to this video and use that as an image. But each player is going to be getting their own player board, which represents their player's clan, and it's going to represent the city along with the war chiefs and the high priests, as well as the troops that you're going to be building up throughout the game. You're going to be using this board to upgrade those different actions, and some of these actions you can perform are making human sacrifices, or if you're not interested in that, you can also build up your troops to control different areas on the map, and doing that will gain you resources, which you can then use to grow your city and get more powerful and make human sacrifices, and then win the favor of the gods and temporarily summon powerful mythical creatures. Players can also take prisoners, which they can sacrifice to earn power from the gods, and players will fight against each other as well. And when you do that, it's simply the player with the highest strength that wins, but you're also going to be able to play one card, which will have a strength on it as well as a special ability, and each card can only be used once per game. And any sacrifices that you make are actually worth more earlier in the game, so you really want to get on that as soon as possible. Of course, you can still make sacrifices later, but you'll just have to do more to get that same reaction from the gods. And throughout the game, there's basically 3 different stats that you're going to be upgrading that will allow you to potentially unlock more powerful actions in those specific areas. And the first one is fighting, and then the second is summoning, and the third is building. And a really great way to get ahead on that is to try and make more sacrifices in the current round than you did in the previous round, because you actually get some additional bonuses if you're able to do that. But for this one, I don't think they have the campaign page up yet, but you can go ahead and subscribe on their website if you want to get notified. And there's also a bunch of really cool images here showing some of the miniatures that are going to be showcased in the game, and some of the different creatures that you can summon as well. And the summoned creatures are interesting because they only stick around for a short period of time before they dissipate back into the ether. And I know what you're wondering, can we sacrifice these summoned creatures as well? And the answer is no, definitely not. Human sacrifices only, don't be a monster. I'm really interested to see more on this game. It looks really tight and punchy, and I'm hoping that the whole design comes together really elegantly. My only concern is that I'm not quite sure how much depth there is to the game until I actually see a little bit of gameplay. But it's got a really great designer, so I think it has a really great shot. So if you really like this designer, or if you like these types of games, or if it's just been a really long time since your last solid human sacrifice, you'll definitely want to check this one out. Also on the 11th, we have Chang'an, which plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 45 minutes to play, and I'm probably pronouncing incorrectly. But this is named after a city in China that was once the largest city in the world, and in this game, players are going to be competing against each other to try and build the best districts within the city. And in this game, players will be acquiring different building plans and planning ahead to try and build those buildings. Players will first be issuing those plans out onto their board, and then they're going to be trying to spend different resources to try and complete those buildings, and then move those plans into the city districts to build the buildings to become more influential in the neighborhood. Every building that a player completes is going to issue them some victory points, but it's also going to allow them for some special actions or privileges for the remainder of the game. And on a player's turn, you can perform 1 out of 3 actions, and the first action is to research in order to gain new cards, or you can choose to play or activate those cards by planning out the build and gaining different resources or activating character effects. And the third action is to actually build the building on that card in order to gain its special abilities as well as the victory points. The game ends as soon as one player builds 9 different buildings, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. So this week is no joke, and we're really getting off with a bang here, and those are all the games I had for the 11th, and I just have one more that's launching on the 13th, and this is for the Rise of the Necromancers. And this is a game for 2 to 5 players, and this is a game that's previously released, but this campaign is going to be reprinting that, but then also offering a new expansion. And in this game, players are evil necromancers competing to rule the world. And this might sound like a bit of a mature theme, but it's actually a little silly and tongue-in-cheek. And in this game, players are starting as unnamed necromancers who don't have a lot of credibility, but then they're going to be learning the 4 different areas of necromancy to try and improve their education in those different areas and try and earn a name for themselves and become better necromancers throughout the game. And players are going to be starting with 3 Necromancer cards and 3 Apprentice cards, and you're going to be using these to collect different sets to earn credibility in different areas of necromancy, but then also using them to perform different actions throughout the game. And the apprentice cards are really nice as well because they can also be pretty much offered as human sacrifices. On your turn, you'll be able to play any cards you have in your hand, and then you can summon a monster, and then you can move your Necromancer across the board and perform an action based on the location that you stop on. Visiting the different academies and becoming specialized in that school of thought will allow you to become headmaster of one of the 4 necromancy fields of study, which are of course blood, decay, bone, and spirit, and you'll also be able to explore different dungeons. And the new expansion is the Undead Sea expansion, and this is going to add a completely new game board, but it's also going to add new necromancers that you can play as, new apprentices, new monsters that you can summon or defeat, as well as new victory conditions to add further challenges to the game. And as I said, the core game has been out for a while already, so there's already quite a lot of content out there if you want to see more details on the gameplay. And you can also check out what other content creators have to say. Just make sure that you tell them I sent you, because if you don't, I will come and I will find you and I will play all your board games. The campaign will also be offering the previous expansions, so I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get all the content and more if this is one that you're interested in. And for those of you that do watch my videos, you know that I always have pledge giveaways at the end of each episode, usually offering free pledges for games that just launched in the past week or two on Kickstarter or GameFound. But since we just had that giant lull in December, I don't really have any giveaways queued up right now, so I'm going to have to try and build that up over the coming weeks. So what I'm going to do instead is offer a giveaway of my own, and this one's going to be a little bit cooler because instead of it being for a specific campaign, this is going to be for any pledge for any campaign that you want over the year of 2022. Up to $150 US, because I'm not rich yet. And part of the reason I'm doing this is because you've all been so awesome over the past year, and I really appreciate all the kind words and words of encouragement. It really means a lot, honestly. But also it's not just because of that, and you don't have to be nice to me to enter this giveaway. Sometimes I just want to have fun as well, and I think this is going to be a fun thing to do on the channel. And sometimes I just want to do something nice for you guys. But it's super easy to enter this giveaway. You don't have to subscribe, you don't have to like, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is leave a comment, but you don't have to leave it on this video because I actually already announced this giveaway on my previous video. So I'll leave a link to that right up here. And you can just go ahead, check out that video. Feel free to watch it if you're interested. I just go over all the campaigns that I backed in 2021 and all the ones that I almost backed and a couple that I regret not backing. And I give my reasons for that and I offer up some interesting insights in my own way. I explain the giveaway in that video as well, but don't feel like you're missing anything if you don't watch to that part, because all you have to do is leave a comment on that video, watch it if you like the content, and also I do appreciate a like and subscribe if you do feel like I earned it. And those are all the campaigns I have for you today. Make sure to tune in next week if you want to know more on Marvel Zombicide, along with all the other games that are going to be launching that week. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.